Welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm your own Karen, and my guest for this episode is Ike Hecht, the founder and CTO of the MediaWiki consulting company WikiTeq, and a frequent collaborator of mine on all things MediaWiki consulting related. Ike, good to see you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Great to be on, Yarrow. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, by the way, this is your third time on. You were a guest in 2021, I think, and then you were the host for the episode, the 100th episode, where I was the guest.
So am I the first one to be on 3 times?
I should have checked before. I believe you are.
Wow, what an honor.
Yeah. Absolutely. I should ask, as always, where are you located for those who didn't hear the previous episode?
I'm in Boca Raton, Florida.
Fantastic. Which seems to, in Florida, increasingly seems to be, the center of everything, at least in the United States, which is an odd turn of events.
Yeah, Boca Raton was always, I think, a tech hub, and it definitely took off. I mean, South Florida especially, you can't get a house, and if you can, it's double whatever it was 2-3 years ago. It's really wild.
Right. I don't know if that's directly due to tech money. It's just sort of due to sort of everything money, I think, but I don't know. Maybe it's all that.
Yeah, it's not specific to tech, but for me.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
It's cool to be in the tech hub.
Well, I'm glad that we're sorry to hear that. I'm not sure, actually.
I'm not sure myself.
Okay. We could talk about MediaWiki stuff. I wanted to I wanted to have you on to talk about AI. Actually, when I told you that, you said you're not qualified to talk about AI, but actually, I think you're the most qualified person I know to talk about AI because you are both a technologist and a rabbi. And for me, I'm personally not that interested in talking about the specifics of AI technology as it stands today. What are the strengths? What are the limitations? It can write limericks, but it can't. Whatever it is, I don't know, solve a puzzle. Maybe it can already do that as well. I don't know. But the thing is, it's all, any of it could change in 6 months, let alone, 5-10 years from now. I think, I feel like the discussions of AI really veer at this point more toward the philosophical or religious rather than the technical. And that, well, in some cases they veer toward the apocalyptic also, but I hopefully we can avoid that. I mean, obviously, if AI manages to set off a nuclear bomb, then all bets are off. But like I said, in the more pedestrian near term of it, how this is just a random question, but how confident do you feel that we, as software developers anyway, will still have a job, say, 10 years from now?
All right. Well, first, as an introduction, I am interested in AI. I'm far, far from an expert, more from the consumer side. I've been looking at it and playing around with it. And I'm also far from an expert at being a rabbi. Yes, I am a rabbi, but I don't want anybody to think that what I'm saying is the official view of Judaism on AI, which I don't think there is an official view, and in general there aren't really official views in Judaism. But mine is right. Just a guy giving his take on things. As far as
good disclaimer,
yeah, and as far as AI, I mean, will we have a job? I think so. I think we'll probably have more jobs than now, because somebody's going to have to be creating the code, etc. And in theory, AI could write code, and it's possible that it will write code, but I think you're always going to need programmers to at least control it and at least to prompt it. So I don't think programming jobs are going anywhere soon. Long term, I don't think anybody really knows anything about the long term at this point. Technology has been speeding up and the rate of change has been speeding up. If you think about where we are now compared to 100 years ago, it's a huge leap, but it's probably about the same. If you were calculating the difference between, let's say, 1920 and 1940, and then between 1940 and 1960, you'll probably find that the rate increased. And if you look at the difference between 2000 and 2020, you'll probably find that the change is way, way more. And if you look at it like that, things are going to change very, very quickly, because what took 20 years to get here may only take 5 years. The difference between now and 20 years ago, 2003, may be the same as the difference between now and 2028. And if that's the case, then that span is going to get shorter and shorter. So we could be seeing huge changes at a certain point in a matter of months.
I have to disagree with that. I mean, to some extent, you're right. Certainly about the progress of AI, which has been just astounding in just the last year. I can't remember when I first saw some DALL-E images, DALL-E. It was maybe even less than a year ago, maybe about a year ago. And that was the first I really knew about this whole, new wave of AI. And since then, I mean, DALL-E has gone from cutting edge to sort of an afterthought at this point. Just in terms of the visual AI stuff. But I have to disagree about the rate of progress. And I guess that ties into some of my thinking about this whole thing. I mean, yeah, sure. 1920 to 1940 is a huge jump. If you look at, say, 1980 to 2000, that's a massive jump. I mean, there was no World Wide Web in 1980. It was all mainframe stuff, and in 2000, people already had cell phones, the earliest social networking, just a whole plethora of new programming languages. Just everything felt different. But between 2000, well, I mean, MediaWiki just turned 20 years old, roughly. Don't remember when exactly that happened, but sometime very recently. And it's still, I mean, it was the big wiki software then, and it remains the big wiki software now. I mean, most of the current programming languages and software that we're using were actually around 20 years ago. It's not like there's been a big seismic shift, it feels like to me, with exceptions, of course, Bitcoin, crypto, blockchain, now AI. Obviously we're not in stasis, but it feels like there's been a slowdown in terms of technological progress.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think that there's been a speed. It just may not be in specific areas. And I think that's how technology change happens. But really any change, I think, over the passage of time, it's slow. And then suddenly it's like really, really fast. Like it builds up. And I think we've seen that in AI. Like AI didn't just show up over the last year or two. It's been progressing for many years. And then all of a sudden it just kind of exploded. So, there are different aspects of technology, like you mentioned, crypto and things like that, where, crypto also, existed for a long time, and then all of a sudden it exploded. And, you'll have specific technologies. Yes, they won't really advance that much over time, but technology in general, I think that the rate of change is always going to increase.
Well, yeah, it's interesting with AI. I mean, AI has existed for a long time, and actually there was a program called Eliza, I believe, even it's created in the 60s, that talked to the person, in a Chat GPT like way. It was just intended as a therapist, and it was pretty simple. You said, I'm feeling bad, and asked, how are you feeling bad, that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's appears that there's just some kind of natural tipping point as far as the current strength of CPU power or something that renders it from okay to amazing. Sort of this one multiplication by two of the computing power or whatever was the thing that did it. I don't know, but yeah, yeah, so right, and of course you never know what will happen. But I don't know. Have you heard of this guy Peter Thiel?
That sounds familiar.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's Thiel. He's one of the co-founders of PayPal, the less famous co-founder of PayPal, and big VC guy. But he also has a lot of interesting thoughts, I think, about society and so forth. His view is that human progress basically peaked in the late 1960s, and that it's all been downhill from there, especially in everything that's not software, not hardware and software. All the there's been basically no advances in, say, chemical engineering, materials science, physics, all this kind of stuff. But even in the realm of computing, there's just a slowdown. He says it's not a natural slowdown, and it's due to society sort of shunning innovation. To me, I find it persuasive, although to me it just feels like we're just running out of things to invent at this point. Slowly running out of things. There'll presumably be more, but it's not like the days of being able to sit in a basement and invent the light bulb and the phonograph and so forth.
Yeah, I don't understand how that could be. From what I know, I don't know what exactly the number. I think every year we're adding like 4 months to the average lifespan or something like that. So, the average lifespan has changed significantly since the 60s. To me, that's progress. I mean,
you got to. Well, I hate to push back on everything, but I think you got to check your statistics. I believe at least in the United States, the average lifespan is actually decreasing. Partly that might be
the last couple of years.
Well,
has,
okay,
yes,
yeah, we're in obviously unusual times, but
it's definitely much longer than it was in the 60s. I mean, if that's not progress, then I'm not sure what is. And I don't know how that works. I mean, I can order things by talking to a machine, and it shows up at my door that day. I mean, in the 60s, you didn't have that ability to do that. So
you could if you consider the telephone a machine, then
it wasn't showing up that day, and your selection was minimal at best.
Wait, you could order takeout. This is a weird.
Oh, I'm talking about Amazon, where you can almost anything will show up that day or the next day.
Right. Okay, I see. Yeah. All right. Of course, Amazon is.
Information wasn't available to people in the 60s. Where you can ask me any question and I can answer intelligently. Even before AI, I could just Google it and give you something intelligent within a minute. Whereas, in the 60s, you were going to the library and it would take you a few hours to track it down.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, there's no question that there's been a lot of improvements over the last 60 years. And sure, even the last 20 years, I would grant that. Although the examples you've given were all true, I would say 20 years ago. Of course, the devil's in the details. Obviously, just because something existed in some form doesn't mean it's at all the same as it is now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the technology is going to go much faster. We're going to reach the point where AI can write code and improve itself. And that will all happen nearly instantly because that's how AI writes code. It just writes it quickly. And once it reaches that point, I don't see how it doesn't just keep on getting better and better, like very quickly.
Well, okay, yeah. Now we're getting to what's talking about what's known as the singularity. I don't know how you feel about the concept of the singularity. Which is basically the moment you describe. I mean, presumably things will just change at that point immediately, because software can just decide instantaneously to make itself smarter and that sort of thing. But I mean, getting slightly out of the technological aspects of that. I mean, what does it mean for humanity if our thinking skills are not just simply not as necessary as they were before? Granted, let's say there will, for the foreseeable future, be some things that only humans can do, and so it's not like we will just be, lying around on beach chairs and or in some sort of artificially constructed cage. So yeah, let's take it as a given that there will be indeed the need for humans. Still, there's just an element of human intellect and innovation possibly becoming less important than it is now. I mean, just as human strength has become quite a bit less important than it was, up until, I don't know, say 100 years ago. I mean, I don't know. It feels like it's like sort of a philosophical discussion about what is that a good or a bad thing? I mean, should we take pride in the intellectual achievements that we do, the things that we do on a daily basis, or is that itself sort of sinful to begin with? Are we sort of deluding ourselves into thinking that makes us good people, that we have these intellectual accomplishments, and so any kind of software intervention, AI replacement is really just showing us the folly of our ways that we thought that this was what makes for a good life.
Well, as a religious person, what is good? What are we here for? How do we do something good? What do we accomplish? The main thing is to serve God. There are many ways to do that, but that's not going to change because there's artificial intelligence. So from a religious perspective, at least, we can keep on, doing what we did before. I don't think that really will change as far as like the meaning of life and what our mission is, what our goals are. As far as, accomplishments, any accomplishment is something to be proud of. Ultimately, the best accomplishment you can have is helping others. And if you're improving the life of somebody else, it doesn't really matter how you're doing it. I think that's something that's quite an accomplishment and something you should feel proud of. So if you do it with AI, sure. If you could do it much faster with AI, then great.
How do you feel about pride in general? For Christianity, it's one of the 7 deadly sins. And I always thought Judaism, it's not quite so clearly laid out there, but I always thought Judaism takes kind of a skeptical view of pride as well. I mean, on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, we basically are supposed to remind ourselves of how ineffectual and incompetent we are.
So it's interesting. People sort of assume, because we call them Judeo-Christian values, that they are the same. And probably 90+% of things, they are the same. There's a reason for that. Christianity historically came from Judaism. And it's not quite, there's a lot of major differences. So it doesn't quite work like that. Pride in Judaism, it's not considered a good thing. But the truth is that every aspect of humanity, it's not really good or bad. It's not seen in those absolute terms. Everything has to be in the right amount. It has to be in the correct measurement. We call it a midah in Hebrew. So is pride bad? Kind of, but a certain amount of it is good. Same thing with humility. Humility is obviously good, but a certain amount of it, not so much. and you could go through probably all of, I don't know what those deadly sins are, but you could probably go through each one, and we'll view it as correct to have that. It just has to be, at the right volume, in the right place, with the right boundaries. As far as pride itself, there's nothing wrong with pride as long as it's true and as long as you understand it in its correct perspective. If somebody truly did something great, then of course he should feel proud of it because it's true. He did something. But at the same time, he should realize everything that I did, everything that I accomplished, it's not really because of me. It's because of, the talent that either I was given naturally, or it was other people who helped me, or it was other people who just, brought me up, sustained me, etc. That's all true. So in a certain sense, humility in Judaism is really just the truth. When you understand the truth, you'll see that you accomplished, but you're not really better than anybody else. You may have accomplished more than somebody, but that could be due to many circumstances. So as long as it's true, there's nothing really wrong with pride. And of course, as long as you don't act as if you're better than somebody else, then again, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The idea that you're really just trying to describe things as they are accurately. I mean, for us programmers, it's kind of a joke to talk about how whatever accomplishments we've made, because it's just there's so much stuff underlying whatever it is that we're working on. There's so many millions of man hours that have been put in place that we had absolutely nothing to do with. Yeah, I mean, at the same time, it's so easy to fall into the trap of self-esteem. I don't know. I wanted to. You probably heard this joke, but I want to share it. That it's there's a cantor on Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, when you're supposed to be as humble as possible. There's a specific blessing, or not a blessing, a prayer where he sings, I'm nothing, I'm less than nothing, I have no redeeming qualities, that kind of thing. The cantor gets really wrapped on the emotion. He falls to his knees and sings this out. So the rabbi sees him, who's sitting next to him, or standing next to him. He gets overcome too, so he falls to his knees and says, "I too am nothing. I'm less than nothing." So then sitting in the congregation is the president of the congregation, who's overcome also, and he too falls to his knees and says, "I too, Lord, am absolutely nothing." So then the rabbi rolls his eyes and looks at the cantor and says, "Look who thinks he's nothing."
Very good. I've heard it before in a different version, but
Okay.
Same idea. Yep. And it's actually, I mean, it's true for a person to view themselves as nothing takes a lot of character. You don't get it that easily. So that's, the truth behind the joke, I guess. And I think in that instance, when we're standing before God, that itself has to humble us, because that gives us a perspective that, somebody doesn't believe in God, it might be harder. All you have to compare yourself to is the greatest human, and you might actually be the greatest human for all you know, and it makes it more of a challenge, I guess. But if you're looking at, an all merciful, all powerful being and comparing yourself to him, it's very easy to say, "I'm nothing," because in comparison to that, yes.
Right. Well, thank you, by the way. Yeah. Oh, I don't know if you're saying I specifically.
Oh.
And the world's greatest, but yeah. No. Yeah. Well, it could. I mean, it could be that religion really has from a pragmatic standpoint, really has the only answer for the sort of existential aspects of AI, of the possibly coming AI revolution, that really is the only way we can get any kind of meaning if and when all the the aspects of life that we know, the connection between hard work and intellect and sustenance sort of dissolve. I mean, they've already dissolved to some extent. Well, here's an that's an interesting question. Obviously, we have a welfare state, so you don't have to work in order to provide for your family. Interestingly, the ultra Orthodox Jews, and I think there are other various communities that you could say that of, tend to be, from what I understand, on welfare, both in Israel and in the United States. The Hasidic people and so forth. You may have more insight on that, but so it seems like in that case they've already sort of solved the puzzle. It's basically you can just not do anything productive and just live a happy and presumably penitent and meaningful life.
I'll disagree with that. It's impossible to feel happy if you're not doing anything productive. So, those, whoever it is, I don't want to, say there are specific groups that do it. There are many groups that do it. The ones who aren't working, anybody who isn't working and is receiving, the largesse of the state, there's certainly a downside to not supporting yourself, not being able to earn your own money and support yourself, support your family. That's a major, major hit on anybody's, feeling of accomplishment. It doesn't mean that you don't have other accomplishments. They presumably, there are students who are, they're taking out student loans, they're getting all sort of grants, etc. And what they're doing with it is that they're studying, and, people in the religious community may be doing the same. They're studying, they're accomplishing in their studies.
Sure.
Again, the fact that they're not supporting their family that takes away some of the meaning, that takes away some of that ability to feel good, but it can be substituted in other ways.
Okay, I mean, all right, you may be right, but nonetheless, there are people of various religions, actually, from what I understand, who would disagree. Presumably, I don't know if they would disagree that they're not, and whether they're having a happy life or not. But certainly, it seems like it's a sustainable lifestyle, at least from the point of view that it just goes on. From one generation to the next, right. that it seems pretty stable.
Well, sure. It can go on as long as there's meaning there. Person to live life without meaning and without accomplishment, I don't think that's a long-term solution. And if AI delivers, a point in time where we don't need to work and everything is just delivered to us and it's all for free, well, I think you'll see probably a lot more depression, because it's very tempting to go through life like that. But the way to get around that is to keep on accomplishing in other ways, to sort of leverage the fact that, okay, I don't have to work now, but what can I do instead to help the world, to help others, and maybe to improve myself? There are many things that we can do for ourselves. It makes it harder as time goes on, as life gets easier. It makes it harder to sort of push yourself, to motivate yourself, the same as it was years ago, when people, if they didn't work as hard as they possibly could, they would literally die of starvation. That's a very big motivator.
Right, sure.
So it's harder to motivate ourselves, and that could be why, at least from my perspective, and I know people will disagree, there's much more depression and people are not as happy as they used to be. It's going to get worse, I think.
Yeah, I wonder about that too. There seems to be, just from what I've read, sort of an epidemic of depression. There's obviously, there's no way to know all this stuff. I mean, it does seem like the lockdown had a profound effect on some people in communities, just in taking away the social aspects and presumably taking away the livelihood of a lot of people. Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, it's interesting. Maybe religion is the only solution. Maybe, I mean, obviously, there are people who spend a lot of time in gaming, and that sort of becomes like a real life kind of project with defined tasks and accomplishments and so forth. I don't know. It feels so dystopian to imagine that will be the answer for society to to just pretend that they're in some battle or ongoing war or whatever. Although maybe less dystopian than real wars, which also has been the way people have found meaning all throughout history.
Sure.
So I don't know.
The people after a real war feel tremendous sense of accomplishment, and they should. Assuming it was a good war. They protected their friends. They protected their country.
Well, okay, yes.
It's it's hard to say like this is a good thing and this is a bad thing. War in general is bad, but like we just saw, it can deliver a lot of meaning as well. And some wars are necessary, and some wars improve the world.
Sure, that's true. But if you have a case where, well, okay, I don't know. We want to get into history and the history of conflicts and what actually has caused wars. I don't think it's the case that wars have simply been spawned as a result of people feeling unfulfilled in their lives. But who knows? Maybe ultimately that is what has caused territorial disputes throughout history. Just a hankering for something better and a way for young men to prove themselves on both sides of some border. So maybe if that can be sublimated into fighting over World of Warcraft or something, then it's the lesser of two evils.
I would take it, sure.
Okay. All right. Well, that's already good to hear.
Look, listen, accomplishing within, the realm of computer games is an accomplishment. There are different types of accomplishments. I don't think that it's going to rival the feeling of helping somebody else or people who have helped people in meaningful ways. The high that you get from that, I think, is unmatched. And a life lived like that is a very meaningful and very happy life. And I don't think it matters so much what the other circumstances of life are. Like people struggle, just earning a living, supporting a family, things like that. That doesn't necessarily make them unhappy. Sometimes it can make them very happy.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, it seems like ultimately that has to be the answer. Certainly, it's been that's been what's driven people throughout all of human history. The whole concept of innovation is such a new idea in the span of human history. Obviously, there's been in innovation, but just the idea that you would go to school and in the expectation that you're going to change the world in some way, that you're going to invent something and it will spread and so forth. That was basically a foreign concept for the vast majority of human history until maybe 200 years ago.
And that's, I think, the big question. We keep on innovating and we keep on having all these good things, but if the world isn't getting better, then why is that? If everything is better, then why is the world worse?
What? Yeah. Right. Okay.
And you could look at specific inventions and sort of wonder about it. Is the computer a good invention? In a certain sense, sure. I mean, it brought us to where we are, like you mentioned, and lengthened our lifespans. But if things like the internet are making teenagers depressed and suicidal, is the internet good? There's a trade-off there. There are ways that it makes our life more convenient, but if it also makes it less meaningful, then maybe it's not worth it. And I sort of feel the same way about AI. AI is going to change the world, and in many ways it's going to be way better. But in many ways, we could end off way worse. And I don't think anybody really has the answer to that. We don't know where we're going. I don't think anybody really knows. One thing I would disagree with Mr. Thiel is that we're going to change a lot.
I see. You're saying yes. You're saying that changes are just
nobody
beginning.
knows what's coming, but I think what's for sure is that we have no idea what's coming. It's going to be very different.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that would be. I mean, yeah. That's always the downside of people who are of being involved in the information technology world is if you look at it from too great a distance, it's certainly a feeling of accomplishment to improve some software and fix some bug and so forth. But if you look at it from too great a distance, like what are we actually doing here? It can lead you to question things. I don't know. Although at least in the wiki world, it's not like anyone's blaming wikis for societal decline. I feel like, I don't know, maybe yes, actually, maybe the fact that Wikipedia is so accessible and easy to use sort of reduce our natural curiosity. Why ask a stranger a question or go to a library or something if you can just get all that information immediately?
Sure, but I mean, really, just even the good parts of Wikipedia, of advancing technology, are we sure that advancing technology is actually good? And it could be that anything that we do, this is going to be scary, but anything that we do, improving MediaWiki and improving intelligence gathering, knowledge sharing among companies, who says that that's actually good?
Right. Okay. I was hoping you would say that. Yeah, sure. Okay, that's fair. It feels like it's good. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're helping other people, then it's good. If those other people feel better about what you're doing, then sure, you're making their job easier. If you're making it easier for them to support their family, then that itself is a good thing. And again, there might be a trade-off, but
sure,
still feel good about the accomplishments.
Yeah, and wikis generally aren't a source of negativity, although I should be careful when I say that, because if you've seen some of the talk page discussions on Wikipedia, you might feel differently. But generally, it's not compared to all the general social media options and so forth, it seems like a much more wholesome kind of product.
Well, like you said, for all these things where we're trying to judge what's good, what's bad, do we turn to religion? Sure. And that way, I think I would argue it's the same as anything else. All knowledge of the world at some point was rooted in religion, when it was looked at it in a religious perspective. And I don't think anybody can really fool themselves and say that their ideas and their values, their morals, had nothing to do with religion. They made it up out of thin cloth, in their own brain. So, yes, religion will show us, how to move forward. And you might wonder how religion can have anything to say about it. But I think, as we've seen, a lot of wisdom that's been accumulated by the human race over thousands of years. And we're not going to turn to that to guide us in how to move forward. I'm not sure what you would return to. I mean, you ask AI these questions, you're not going to get anything of significant value.
Well, yes, right. Yeah, that's talk about dystopian. Sure. No, I totally agree with that. I mean, and just the whole idea of a conflict between science and religion is just, that's just such a facile way of viewing things. I think. I mean, the idea that science disproves religion or something was. If you believe that, it was just as true, 500 years ago when it was discovered that the Earth revolves around the sun and not the other way around. If that's what you're looking for, you could have found that at any time. But yeah, that's that's just that's I think just a surface level view of things. Yeah, and a lot of the great scientists and some of the great computer scientists too, like Donald Knuth, have been very religious. Yeah.
There's no contradiction between science and religion. They've always actually worked very well together. And we shouldn't be looking to science to solve these moral questions. I don't think science has anything to say about morality. It can guide us. It can inform us, in how to judge based on our values, whether it comes from religion or anywhere. It can help us along that way, just in like the fact finding. But ultimately, the moral questions, it comes down to us.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I mean, how do you feel about people who are rabbis who cite studies and so forth in their sermons? Is that a useful thing, or is that kind of just kind of a gimmick to the whole idea of looking for justification outside of religion for whatever your case you're trying to argue?
I don't have a problem with it. If the study's true, 90% of studies have been completely made up, including that one that I just cited.
Well, yeah, it is weird. I mean, that's a whole separate thing. I feel much more of a kinship with engineering than with science, because everything.
Yeah.
As I become older, I become the kook that I used to make fun of when I was a kid, who doesn't really believe in science and studies and and all that kind of stuff.
Right. In what they call the hard sciences, those studies are pretty useful. The other ones, some of them are. You sort of have to know what you're doing with them. And I know that they recently studied, and they found out that 90% of I think the psychology studies couldn't be replicated, which is a very high number.
I thought it was 50%, but it could. I mean, who knows? It could.
Maybe it is 50. I mean,
whatever it is, it's extremely.
So we have to view everything with skepticism. But sure, if it's a useful study, then all it is just fact finding about the world. And like I said, that certainly is a great thing to know more about the world. There's a lot of wisdom out there, and the more you can bring into your sermon or whatever it is, sure, just don't rely on it to dictate morality.
All right. Fair. Okay. Well. That's really what I wanted to ask about as far as AI. I feel like we've solved the big questions. So. Yeah. Well, we can talk about MediaWiki stuff. I mean. We just met at EMW Con again. Not met for the first time, obviously, but we just saw each other again. They're in Austin. What was it, 2 months ago or something? Yeah, that was pretty neat.
Sure. I think that all those conferences are very good. I know we're trying to move more into in-person for next year, which I actually think is a good idea. It's, I guess, related to AI in that sense, and that there's something human about having people actually there and being able to interact with them. And to me, the main point of the conference really is sort of that social interaction, to get to know people.
Yeah, it was neat. As always, there's always the people that you've seen online a lot, but have never actually met in person, and that was the case this one too, including your new. Your new WikiTeq guy. I don't know if we should talk about him specifically, but he was there too.
There were two other members of WikiTeq, and yes, one of them, Brian Wolf, I knew from before, actually, from a different MediaWiki conference, and Daniel Scherzer. I never met him in person, and actually, there are a number of people at WikiTeq who I've never met in person. So yeah, it's good to have a conference. Actually, get to know the people who I work with on a daily basis, but everybody else as well.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty neat, by the way, that Brian works for WikiTeq. He's a regular on the podcast. He's in the Two Timers Club on this podcast.
Yeah, I look down at those two timers.
I know. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, that guy really knows security better than anyone, and just and he's just generally a very bright guy. Yeah, so it's cool that you've got him on the WikiTeq team now.
I agree 100%. That's very cool. We actually we had this interaction. People can check if they want in the original Houston EMW Con, where I was mentioning something about committing to Git, and Brian sort of argued with me about the security implications of that. It wasn't really an argument. We were really on the same team, just sort of chatting back and forth. But yeah, cool interaction. Brian's awesome, and it is amazing to have him on the team. He's good at security, coding, pretty much everything we throw at him.
Yeah. Oh, you're saying you gave a talk in Houston, and you can hear him in the background, sort of poking holes in the right. Okay.
I was saying that you shouldn't commit your passwords to Git, and Brian sort of was like, "Yeah, I don't think you should do that because there's this thing called Google." And I sort of played along. Of course, I wasn't really talking about committing it to GitHub. I was even saying in the local Git repo. It's probably not a good idea because people tend to leave the .git directory visible to the web. They're not supposed to, but people tend to do it. And just in case, it's probably not a good idea to have passwords in your .git. So don't commit any passwords to Git unless you really, really know what you're doing.
There you go. You heard it here.
Yep.
I wanted to ask about something else. If we had time, we do have a little more time. We had a discussion there about marketing of MediaWiki, which is sort of the perennial topic. It's frustrating to some people, at least the ones who hold the view that software is good for society. Just the view that MediaWiki and the version of MediaWiki that we know with all these extensions and so forth it should be much better known and more widely used than it is now. So actually, this is bizarre, but I want to quote Peter Thiel again. Because he has, I mean, I read a book of his. He wrote one book called 0 to 1, which is he talks about all this kind of stuff, but the big focus is business marketing strategy, where the idea is it's much easier to succeed if you are the first person or the only person to be something. And of course, that's kind of a gray area. I mean, he uses Google as an example, and that was not the first search engine, but it was the first in some ways. I don't know. It was so much better than everyone else that it could sort of be considered the first, rather than simply being a competitor who was a little better or a little cheaper or whatever it is. And that's reflected in other business strategy books as well, from what I understand. But
it sounds like red ocean, blue ocean type of strategy.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Okay. Well, in what way did he say it was better?
It's just easier. It's easier to succeed in the short term and long term. I'll have to look up this red ocean, blue ocean.
When you have no competitors?
Yes. Maybe that goes without saying. The thing is, if you find you have competitors, then the thing is to narrow your market focus until find a smaller pond where you can be the big fish in it.
Yeah. Well, when you look up red ocean, blue ocean, you'll see it's the same idea.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Yes, and in fact, it has that same fish metaphor.
Amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, from our perspective, that it seems like it translates directly into packages and products, meaning, you can use MediaWiki as a project management tool, but that's probably not the angle we would want because there's, literally dozens of project management tools out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
to relate it to something we said before, technology progresses slowly before it suddenly explodes. So I would say don't give up. It's been progressing slowly doesn't mean it can't quickly increase. The reason it would do so is I think the strength of MediaWiki is the ability to customize it to do anything, which you can't do with certainly any proprietary software, at least not easily. But also, like you mentioned, project management. Yes, there are many, many pieces of software that can do project management and can do it much better than any package will be able to do with MediaWiki, I think. But the strength of MediaWiki is that you can have really tight integration between all of those tools, which you're not going to be able to do even with software packages that claim tight integration. It doesn't ever work that way. Whereas in a wiki, it really is seamless.
That's true, and I certainly don't mean to disparage. I mean, we worked together on a project management tool called Canasta PM, which I think is great. It turned out great, and that's certainly going to be a useful product for people who have already chosen to use MediaWiki for one reason or another. But I don't think it's. I'm just saying I don't think it's the selling point for new customers.
Right.
But I'm hoping that there does exist such a thing, even if it's a really niche product market. Whatever it is, like customer relationship management for farmers or that sort of thing. Yeah, so I feel, and of course there are potentially hundreds of those, but I feel like that's what we, and by we I mean, well, maybe our two companies, maybe all MediaWiki consulting companies, maybe all enterprise MediaWiki people just need to need to coalesce on one or more of these, but I don't know.
It's a good question. I think we've known each other, believe it or not, for 17 years. And I feel like we've been discussing this for 17 years. And
Wow.
I've always sort of viewed it that MediaWiki is at its core knowledge management. And the unique selling point of MediaWiki, I think, is knowledge management. That's what it is. As a project management tool, it's good in the fact that every project task has knowledge in it. So it just gives you a way to do knowledge management with additional tools, that you would expect from project management software. And it's a way to integrate the knowledge that you have in your tasks into the rest of your knowledge base that you have in the wiki. WikiTeq does not use Canasta PM for its project management, believe it or not. We use proprietary software. And I know that's sacrilegious, but we have a problem because of it, because we do have a wiki, but it has nothing to do with our project management tasks.
Okay,
there's a lot of information that's in, our project management tool that isn't in the wiki. So, we solve that by whenever there is a task that has knowledge that's important to live on, we put it in the wiki, and we're disciplined because the guy in charge makes sure that it's disciplined.
Very good.
But it does create a problem when your knowledge management and your project management are in different tools, and Canasta PM does solve that. For a technology company, I don't know if Canasta PM is the right way to go. It might be, but it might not be. But if project management is not as essential to your daily processes, then Canasta PM could be a better solution because it just tracks your knowledge and it's just there. It's in your wiki.
Yeah. Right. Sure. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the world's
Right.
greatest project management software if it
Mhm.
has if it can just come built in and fit in with the system you already have. Sure. Yeah, no, that's interesting. It feels like to your general point, it feels like a cop out to just say the best selling technique for MediaWiki is the one that is the thing that people have gravitated to MediaWiki for this whole time, which is I want something like Wikipedia, but for my own use, for my own data or knowledge. Maybe that's the right solution. Maybe that is indeed the right approach, and everything else is just sort of I don't know. Well, speaking of being vainglorious, maybe everything else is just sort of being vainglorious and delusional. But I feel like there are other approaches that can be done. But I don't know what if you were at a if you shelled out $6,000 to get a booth at some, I don't know, South by Southwest or some sort of trade conference, some sort of tech conference. I hope I'm not trying to extract confident proprietary information here, but what kind of slogan would you put on the poster board behind you?
Something like, share your knowledge, something along those lines.
All right.
As you can see, I don't have a marketing background, but
no, that's fair.
That's really what it would be. It's the knowledge of the company. The elevator pitch is that everybody in your company has a piece of knowledge, and if they're the only one with that knowledge, then that knowledge will eventually get lost. Eventually, it's gone. You don't want it that way, and you don't want people to have to learn. When people visit WikiTeq, they don't have to train because all of our information is in our wiki. We literally send them a URL to our onboarding page, and we just set them free. And all of the knowledge that they need to know, maybe not all of it, but the vast majority of it, they're going to get from the wiki, and we don't even have to do anything. And I can't tell you how much easier that makes life for everybody. When you're relying on people to give their knowledge, well, how many people are going to train in one person, and what are they going to forget to give over? And you're sort of going to end up learning on the job anyway. So the wiki approach is something that would benefit really, I think, any organization or company. And I can't necessarily recommend a wiki as your project management tool, but as a tool that tracks your knowledge.
Well, right, yeah, but even outside of project management, just the whole idea of structured data within the wiki and custom data structures and forms and all of that. At what point in your somebody comes up to your booth, at what point would you start talking about that, if at all? Or would you sort of hesitate to even get into that because it just confuses the person and muddies the message?
I think it depends on who's talking. If it's a technology person, then I would start talking about structured data. And we would say that we have a nice little hybrid approach where you can put anything in a wiki, but at the same time you can enforce structure similar to a database, and you could get the advantages of both together, which is great. If they're not a technical person, I wouldn't start getting into structured data.
Yeah, okay.
The interesting thing is, I feel like, getting back to AI, I don't know that structured data is going to be that important moving forward.
Well, that's interesting also. All right.
Yeah. Because and also together with that, I think the fact that AI is going to explode, that wikis, I think there'll be a tremendous need for them. You could look at what I said about having all of your project management tasks in your wiki and say that sounds like a terrible idea, because there's a lot of useful knowledge in project management tasks, but there's probably a lot more not useful knowledge. And why would you want all that stuff in your wiki? Just cluttering things up. Well, if you're going to have an AI read through the wiki and be able to filter out all the information, then you're just going to be able to ask the AI, and there's no such thing as any knowledge that's not useful at all. If it's not useful, it'll just ignore it. Um, so, structured data, we rely on structured data because we don't have artificial intelligence, and we don't, as humans, have the ability to quickly look over the entire wiki and query it for information. But once AI is good enough, what do we need structured data for?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting. I definitely agree that wikis and AI work very well together. As you know, with the so-called single source of truth that the AI can use to not have to scrounge around to various parts of your IT setup. But I don't know. I feel like having a structure versus just the AI reading through a bunch of free-form documents and creating its own map of reality. I feel like having that structure makes it a lot easier, and B, you can give you a lot more confidence that what it's saying is accurate, or at the very least that if it has something inaccurate, that it's easy to change that. I guess that's just a natural advantage of wikis with AI. But just the idea that if you see some incorrect fact, you know exactly where or how that can be fixed.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not saying that there's no use to structured data. It's just that I think with AI, structured data becomes less crucial, and unstructured data becomes much more crucial at the same time. Because it can process all that data easily and be able to filter it out. But yes, AI sometimes will make mistakes. At least at this point, and the mistakes it makes are ridiculous sometimes.
Well, yeah. Well, sometimes they're ridiculous, and sometimes they're not ridiculous at all, and it's hard to know.
Right.
Yeah. There's all kinds of stories already at this point. There's some court case where one of the lawyers clearly used AI and just
cited a bunch of cases that
themselves.
Were completely fictional.
Well,
yes. We actually had that with MediaWiki, where there was some configuration setting that we had to change for a client, and I didn't remember it offhand. So I asked ChatGPT, I said, "This is what I want to do in my wiki. How do I do it?" And it gave me the correct setting, told me how to set it properly, which was good. And then it said, once you do that, navigate to /clear cache in your wiki.
Oh my God!
In order to clear wiki's cache. And there's of course no such special page. So you got you got the good and the bad there. It got the right setting, great, but it just really made something up completely, which is bizarre to me.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I just out of curiosity, I asked one of the AI tools to create a page form's form definition, and it just spat back nonsense. It was just for some other software, I think, or something. Gosh.
It's an interesting thing, we're getting back to AI, but like in a certain sense, being human is good when you're looking for an answer, because a human would never presumably make something like that up, which it knows you're going to try and go to special code and clear cache and see that you just made it up. He would never give you an answer like that because he doesn't want to get embarrassed,
right?
Be viewed as a liar or anything like that. So the human being weak in that sense, in that we have emotions and we're not truly intellectual, like a computer, ends up meaning we'll give better answers.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, that's good. No, that's a very good point. I didn't realize you were going to go that deep. That's absolutely true. But I think there's a big future ahead for AI that actually does database querying in one way or another and combines that with all its text processing. I don't know if such thing has been done already, but these LLMs or whatever you want to call them that can query Wikidata and query your own internal data store in addition to all its text parsing, I think will make it much more powerful, and I guess you could say smarter, and maybe more introspective as well about the things it knows and doesn't know. I don't know. That seems like it could be the future of AI, and maybe the saving grace of structured data in the first place.
Yeah, I think it could be the near future of AI. The distant future, I don't know if we'll be talking to the AI with language. Maybe we'll just be thinking things.
Oh, that's interesting.
Maybe we won't even be asking it. It will just be sort of observing what we're doing and making it better without us even requesting it.
Sure, we'll be like the cats to AI's humans. If that's what you're saying. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know if you're saying we'll be able to just, make some monosyllabic grunts to indicate that we're hungry or something.
I mean, I can't imagine that we won't be having some sort of Neuralink embedded in our brain within a few years.
Really?
We get into concrete AI predictions. But
whoa,
I can't imagine that we're very far off from it. And, being able to think and being able to interact with the AI in that way. And, basically, language models will be like, last generation's technology. All the old people use it.
All right. Wow. That's a bold pronouncement. Do you have a date on that? By
Let's
some
give it
date.
15 years.
In 15 years, we'll all we'll all be implanted with some kind of receiver for our brainwaves.
Yeah, I can't tell you for sure it'll be implanted, but something like that where the AI is able to, detect our brainwaves and help us out on its own without us requesting it. Sure.
All right, very interesting. You heard it here first. 2038.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any predictions? If you had to predict AI something concrete 5, 10, 15 years from now.
How interesting. I'm looking forward, I suppose, to the first fully AI-generated movie, even if it's just a short clip. I mean, there already are, in a sense, so that's an easy prediction to make, but something that actually holds up and doesn't cause epileptic fits. I wouldn't be surprised if within 10 years there'll be something like that, something that someone who didn't know any better would think is actually just a man-made film.
Mm-hmm. I think it'll be bigger than that. I think that the entire film business will be AI, and everybody working in the film business taking over all roles, including earning its own money in its own bank account. I would give it 10 years.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Sure, yeah. I mean, once AI can accept money directly and cut out the middleman, then sure, all bets are off.
Sure. And investing its own money and earning a profit on it, why not? I think actually a big thing in AI, especially now that the major advancement we have right now is in language models. I think that in therapy that we're going to see huge advances. And I would bet in 5 years there'll be more people with an AI therapist than a human therapist.
That's very interesting. I mean, sure. I mean, not even now, anyone who wanted to could have an AI therapist just by going to Bing or whatever it is. Yeah, that's very interesting. And I mentioned Eliza before. Maybe it's no coincidence that therapy was the first real implementation of AI, because it's just a natural fit, because it's so much more about just wanting to express your own problems, and the therapist is to some extent even sort of secondary. It's just a wall to bounce your statements off of.
Yeah, but also providing feedback and empathy and all those things. And
sure.
To a certain extent, if you're talking about empathy, it might be harder for us as humans to feel the empathy of an AI. because we know deep down that it's not really empathy. But I think
yeah, no, I'm not sure
enough.
about that at all. No, I think we have just a natural ability to get past that and just focus.
Yeah.
I've mentioned on the podcast before. I think the concept of rubber duck debugging, which is a pretty powerful debugging tool, where you just if you run into a problem, you just find a rubber duck or teddy bear or whatever to explain the problem to, and that actually solves
Sure.
the issue a lot of the time. Just something there that I think people can overcome their inhibitions about the absurdity of it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I don't think it's even that absurd right now, because what a therapist is doing is fitting back sort of the knowledge that the research in psychotherapy has given us as far as what is the correct response and what is the correct approach for you to take. And if AI can tell you that same approach, then it's really just knowledge that it's giving you. It's lacking that sort of human connection, right? But let's say if you're talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, to be able to give you, to draw out of you the truth of your thinking and how it can be made more truthful and have fewer, distortions. AI can do that part as well as a human probably right now, I would imagine. And I would assume the only reason people aren't using it right now is just partially because it's new, but also because there's like this huge downside risk that it makes stuff up and it gets a lot of things wrong that a human never would. That's not going to continue for much longer, I think.
Well, that's interesting. Well, getting back to our initial discussion, historically, rabbis and clergy and so forth have served that purpose of being someone you come to with problems, confess problems, whatever it is. I don't know if you feel like that your job could be taken over to some extent. Your other job, I should say. Or perhaps there's some sort of, there's some way to inculcate an AI with Talmudic wisdom or the wisdom of any specific religion.
When it comes to psychology, I think that part, I guess, of, the rabbi's job could be easily replaced. But there's a religious component that I don't think that AI could really replace at all. It can give you, like you said, the religious wisdom, but to apply it to an individual in that individual's particular circumstance is very difficult.
All right.
I don't think an AI is going to be able to do that. It can guess, but a rabbi actually knows you, understands you, knows your family, knows your circumstances, sees things from the perspective of a fellow member of your exact community, and I don't think AI is going to be able to have that lived experience.
Well, yeah, there is that. There's knowing the person beyond just what they're telling you at that exact moment.
Right. Yeah. And it's an interesting thing. People view religion as, like, again, absolute black and white, but at least in Judaism, it's very, very much not that way. And a rabbi would easily give answers about concrete questions about what to do in certain circumstances, even religious questions, not even about life advice, but just religious questions, what's permitted, what's forbidden, can give the same question, two different answers, one right after the other, depending on the circumstances of whoever's asking.
Yeah. It makes sense. Very good. I mean, we've covered a lot of stuff from the sacred to the profane.
I live in two very, very different worlds, yes. I guess, in that sense. But again,
okay, maybe not quite profane. They're from the
different, but
sacred to the secular. Well, yeah, sure. Sure. There's all sorts of connections. Very good. This was it was great talking to you as always, Ike. Seems like a good place to wrap it up. But Thanks a lot once again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you again for having me on.
And this has been another episode of Between the Brackets. I want to again thank my guest, Ike Hecht of WikiTeq, for another stimulating conversation. Thanks to all of you for listening, and I'll see you next time.